This episode of Excerpts from Experts is sponsored by Fred Arnold of American Family Funding. As a board member with Child and Family Center, Fred Arnold proudly supports the work our therapists and staff do to assist our community during these challenging times. Thank you for your support. If you would like to sponsor an episode of Excerpts from Experts, email our media team at mediateam@childfamilycenter.org.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode. Today we're going to be talking about maternal mental health, an incredibly important topic. And I'm here with Jennifer Henningfield, licensed clinical social worker. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jennifer.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This is a really important topic, and I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, and even in looking at our current times with COVID-19, having a baby in general can be so many emotions and so much going on. And now we're adding this additional layer of a pandemic and additional isolation. So I just want to start off right off the bat, expecting mothers and new mothers during this time, what are some of the challenges that they may face right now?
Yeah, this is a really scary time. Having a child, especially if it's your first child and you've never gone through this before, but any pregnancy, they're all different. So this is really just taken to the next level with a pandemic on top of it. This pandemic and our, safer at home orders and all of the things that we're doing to protect our health and protect our families have made it really isolating. Sometimes moms haven't been able to have the support that they would normally have in the hospital when they're delivering, and they're certainly not having that support afterwards at home, because normally you would have the neighbors stopping by, bringing casseroles, doing what they could to help. And right now we're being told not to do that. So that does add, so much more, stress and less support to our moms.
Yeah, definitely. And that social support is so important during this new stage, especially if it is a first child. So I wanted to ask you as well, what are some typical reactions or feelings that a new mother may have, bringing in their brand new baby? What might be some things that they can expect that maybe they didn't really recognize could be something that they experience?
Well, I think that, when you announce that you're having a baby, everyone generally is pretty excited about that. And, the moms who are having babies now were pregnant before COVID even started. So they had all of these kind of ideals about how this was just going to be this wonderful time in their lives, and how they were going to have, their mom and their mother-in-law or other friends and family just be there to support them. And now they're home and it's like, oh, I can't have any of those people over. I don't know if they're isolating the way I need them to isolate to be able to be around me and my child, because the mom just went through delivery, which is a major medical event, right? And so you want to keep yourself healthy, you want to keep your baby healthy, and new mothers are in general very protective at that time anyway. And this just heightens that as well, because now it's like, oh my gosh, I'm protecting my child in the middle of a pandemic. So it's kind of like, a bear going into their cave. You almost are hibernating away from the rest of the world.
Yeah, and it can almost feel like this grief and loss situation, right? Because you had these dreams of what it would be like to bring your child home, and now it may look very different from what your expectation was. And in looking at maternal mental health, a lot of times we hear postpartum depression being thrown around. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the mental health concerns that may come up, like postpartum depression?
Well, postpartum depression is one of the things that we sometimes see. It's, not with every pregnancy. And there's even women who have it with one pregnancy, but not other pregnancies. So you might have 3 kids and you only had postpartum depression with one of them. But basically it's this real emotional, a lot of sadness. It's probably the one that's the most focused on, because it's noticeable to the point that there's just this kind of sadness and kind of despair that the mom might be feeling that one wouldn't expect, because here you've just had a really happy event happen. You've had, a baby, and you're bringing the baby home and you've been looking forward to it for so long. And then to have something that you've been looking forward to then leave you feeling so empty is just really a hard place. And the moms feel a lot of guilt, because it's like, oh my God, I must be a terrible mother. that I feel this way, that I have these feelings. And there's a lot of things behind that. Sometimes it's the isolation, sometimes it's being away from a job that they used to identify. Lots of times it's hormonal as well, because, with the whole process of pregnancy and childbirth, hormones fluctuate. And sometimes those hormones and the little trip they take people on are pretty difficult to ride out.
Yeah, I can only imagine the frustration that it can be of not really recognizing what's going on with your own body physically, what's going on mentally. You're having all of these other ideals thrown on you that you need to be so happy right now. This is the best time of your life. But for some individuals, it may be a really challenging and frustrating situation to be in. So you mentioned postpartum depression. Can you speak a little bit about something that's not talked about a lot, of postpartum anxiety?
Yeah, so we talk about depression is probably the one that's talked about the most, but there's anxiety, and anxiety is that worrying, and new mothers do worry. So it is normal to worry. So worrying in itself, if you've got something to worry about, it's fine. But it's when it's that worrying so much that you've worried all the joy out of it, that there's not a moment to enjoy what's happening because you're so consumed with worrying about every little last detail, that you don't get to relax, you aren't sleeping well, and you aren't enjoying this new time of motherhood.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, there are going to be these typical and normal reactions that come with any change in life, especially like a birth, and especially if you're a new mother. So there's always going to be typical reactions. What would you say are maybe some red flags to look out for that perhaps we want to check in on the mental health of an individual who is a new mother?
Well, I mean, pregnancy is a time where people do get more emotional. So if it's the occasional, tearing up and, crying because your baby is just so beautiful, you can't stand it, that's okay. But if it's, this weeping all the time, if there's isolating and wanting to be away from the baby, if the mom's not able to respond to the baby's needs, those are all, some really important red flags to look at, because this is a time for bonding. So the mom and the baby really do have to be together and become in tune to each other. And so that can't happen if the mom can't be present with the baby. So you want to make sure that she's present and that this bonding is occurring.
Definitely. And given our current circumstances where there may be increased isolation, what would you say are some resources that new parents and new mothers can look into if they're starting to recognize these red flags?
Well, for the mom, if she's starting to feel like she might be depressed or anxious or having any kind of her own issues, is to go talk first to her own doctor, to her obstetrician, gynecologist who delivered her baby. Because you know what, there could be some kind of medical reason behind that. So we're always looking at medical, the medical health. How is she doing that way? And the doctor might be able to identify something that's easily resolved, which is great. So don't be afraid to talk about that. I think you have to be, it puts you in a vulnerable spot to say, I just had this new baby, but I'm super depressed, but it's really important to say, hey, I need help. Okay. And so your doctor is probably the first place. There's mental health services available for new mothers and babies. Sometimes if maybe you have a baby who is colicky and you have a mom who's having some depression or anxiety, that bonding and the co-regulation that happens in this early stage is being disrupted. And so at Child and Family, we have early childhood services that include infant massage and co-regulation to really help in that early stage. I know a lot of people don't even think about that you would have mental health services for, a mom and a newborn, but we do, which is great. And then part of it is just support, and so trying to find support where you can, whether it's, joining online groups of other new moms, or even trying to get maybe one or two people in your circle to be able to be there with you and support you physically, and that might mean them isolating themselves for 14 days so that you can feel confident that when they come over that they haven't been around anybody and that they're safe to be in your home.
Such important so important to talk about all these things in terms of our support systems. Oftentimes new grandparents or new aunts and uncles really want to be there. And I think it's important that, if we have those support systems, to really leverage them during this time. And of course, going through all the safety precautions, like you said, of quarantining, those 14 days, and then maybe being able to have that visit. Thank you so much for talking about this. This is sometimes a topic that really isn't addressed. And often I think there's a stigma that's associated with it, right? Because we have all these expectations of ourselves. And now someone as a new mother may have even higher expectations of what they wanted to be in, and just even that new role, right? So thank you so much for joining us today. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
Just, to be kind to yourself. These are difficult times. And I think, that, like you said, the expectations of motherhood, that we're all going to be that perfect mother, and that everything is going to be perfect. We're going to have the baby that is the same baby that's on the diaper package, and everybody's going to be smiling and happy. And you know what? Motherhood's messy. And some days you're smiling and laughing, and other days you're mopping up tears, both yours and the child's. So, be good to yourself.
That's such an important note, really being kind to yourself. So thank you so much again for joining us. We're going to be providing additional links and resources to this post, so look out for that. And again, thank you for joining us today. Have a great one.